He couldn't feel pain, even when bullets tore through his body. It was the dark gift of a surgery built around Formula 47. She was supposed to be done with medicine, done with the grief her mother left behind, done with the darkness her father once served. Then a wounded mafia boss walked into her record shop at 2 in the morning, and from that night on, the life she built to stay safe began to unravel. The steady trickle of water in the sink was the only thing breaking the silence of reverie, records, and coffee in the pre-dawn hours. Behind the bar, Alara stood with her sleeves rolled up to her elbows, slowly rinsing porcelain cups under a stream of warm water. The bitter scent of coffee still hung in the air, mingling with the faint, metallic tang of blood that hadn't quite vanished. She placed the last cup on the rack, grabbed a towel, and leaned down to wipe the oak counter one more time. Even though she had scrubbed it clean, she could still see it. A dark red stain. Right there. His blood. Alara paused for a moment, her eyes fixed on the polished wood. Her fingertips tightened around the cloth. Everything in the shop was back in its place. The cups neatly stacked, the espresso machine off, the vinyl shelves silent under the dim amber lights. But in her mind, the night was far from over. 2 in the morning. The shop bell had chimed with a sharp, hollow ring. She had looked up from her copy of Principles of Neuroscience just as he stepped in a towering shadow draped in the Manhattan chill, smelling of rain and raw iron. He stumbled. Before she could even process it, his left hip collided hard with the sharp corner of the oak counter she had just polished. The wood sliced right into a wound on his side. The sound of tearing fabric was sickening. Fresh blood began to seep out, dripping onto the wood, blooming into a haunting crimson stain. Alara remembered her first reaction vividly, a sharp, hood-hung intake of breath, her entire body tensing instinctively. It was the reflex of someone trained to recognize a shock-inducing impact instantly. But he didn't react like any patient she had ever known. He didn't look down at the wound. He didn't flinch. He didn't hiss through his teeth. There wasn't even a flicker of a muscle in his face. He simply stared at the blood on her counter, a look of strange, almost absurd guilt crossing his features. Then he pulled out a napkin and calmly wiped away the blood. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was gravelly, low, and cold as a frozen lake. "I didn't mean to mess up your shop." Alara stood frozen. Her Johns Hopkins-trained brain was screaming at her. A man with an open wound bleeding through his trousers, who had just slammed his side into a wooden corner, should have been in agonizing pain, yet his only concern was whether he'd stained her counter. It was as if his body and his brain had stopped speaking to each other a long time ago. She didn't waste a second on pointless questions. She moved quickly from behind the bar, grabbing the emergency kit hidden under the bookshelf. "Sit on that sofa." Now, even now, in the quiet of the empty cafe, she could still hear her own voice from that moment, sharp, clinical, authoritative. The voice of an ER doctor, not a girl selling records. He complied, but his movements were wrong. He leaned heavily against the vinyl racks, wrapping his arms around himself, not clutching the bleeding wound, but hugging his entire torso, as if trying to keep something inside from shattering. Alara could still feel the sensation of his blood-soaked white shirt tearing under her hands. 3 bullet wounds, shoulder, thigh, and side. The wound on his side had been torn wide by the counter, revealing raw flesh that pulsed with every breath. She took her tweezers, probing deep to check for wooden splinters. And he didn't move. His silver-gray eyes drifted aimlessly toward a jazz record cover, as if her digging into his flesh was nothing more than a minor annoyance. Alara gripped her towel tighter. She had seen trauma before. She knew all about shock, pain thresholds, and the brain's compensatory mechanisms. But she had never seen anyone like him. The way he sat there, bleeding, torn open, yet completely hollow. It wasn't strength. It wasn't toughness. It was a terrifying kind of disconnection. She looked him dead in the eye and said, "I'm going to stitch this. No anesthesia. It's going to feel like you're being burned alive." He simply replied with a haunting calm, "Do it." And she did. The steel needle pierced the skin. The nylon thread followed. The first knot. The second. Blood continued to seep around the stitches. But he just watched, as if she were patching a hole in his coat rather than his body. Not a single muscle twitched, not a single drop of sweat from the pain. That's when Elora understood, at least part of it. He truly couldn't feel it, or more accurately, he wasn't feeling the pain where it should have hurt the most. She set her forceps down, watching his hands as they trembled, gripping his own shoulders. She asked softly, "Your side doesn't hurt, but you're hurting somewhere else, aren't you?" The deadly composure on his face cracked at that exact moment. "Everywhere," he whispered. "Every cell is on fire. I don't know where to point. Because everything is hell." In that moment, the pieces clicked in Elara's mind. A reversed pain system. His brain wasn't receiving signals from the actual wounds, so it was broadcasting a phantom alarm to his entire body, like a fire alarm screaming through a whole building, because it couldn't locate the room where the fire actually was. And then, she reached out. That was the moment Elara remembered most. Not the blood, not the bullets, not the danger radiating off him, but the moment she sat down beside him and laced her fingers through his large, cold, sweat-drenched hand. Grounding technique. Focus on this. Stop listening to the alarm in your head. Your brain is lost at sea, so I'm going to be your lighthouse. Just focus on the warmth of my hand on yours. She remembered the way the chaotic pulse in his wrist gradually slowed, how his broad, tensed shoulders finally dropped, how the tremors in his body subsided, like a wire pulled too tight, finally being given some slack. She set her towel down and leaned her weight against the clean counter. For the first time in 2 years, the hands that were trained to perform neurosurgery weren't just making coffee. They were doing what they were born to do, to heal, not to turn men into weapons, not to harm, but to heal. That thought cut deeper than the sight of the blood. It made her chest tighten, because the moment her doctor's instincts woke up, an old door had swung open with it. A door leading back to Belgrade, to the biting white winters, to the sterile smell of the hospital room, to her mother Irina. And from there, the memories pulled Elara down, back to where it all began, to the promise she made at 18, to the path she chose and then ran away from. 10 years ago, Belgrade, Serbia, St. Michael's Hospital. Elara was only 18 at the time. The Belgrade winter was bone-chilling, with snow blanketing the ancient cobblestone streets outside the hospital windows. Inside a room heavy with the scent of antiseptic, she sat by her mother's bed. Irina, the woman who had been the strongest, gentlest, and most peaceful sanctuary in Elara's life, was now little more than skin and bones beneath a thin white blanket. Terminal lung cancer. 3 years of fighting. 3 years of fading away. Elara remembered her mother's hand vividly cold, frail, with blue veins tracing through paper-thin skin like tiny, intricate rivers. Her mother gripped her hand, pouring every last ounce of her remaining strength into the most important dying wish of her life. "Don't become like your father." Elara looked up, her throat tight with unshed tears. Her mother didn't say it with bitterness. It wasn't a reproach or an act of resentment. It was said with the bone-deep exhaustion and helplessness of a woman who understood all too well how far the man she loved had lost his way. She told Elara that her father was the most brilliant doctor she had ever known, a true genius. But he had taken a wrong turn, using his talent to make a fortune instead of healing the sick. He had done things she couldn't bear to think about, all driven by a desperate desire to fund her treatments. But Irina didn't want a life bought with the blood of others. She gently stroked the back of Elara's hand. Her eyes were clouded by illness, but they still held the desperate light of a mother trying to keep her daughter on the side of righteousness. "You have a gift, just like him. Pattern recognition. That's what the professors called it. But use it the right way, Elara. Study medicine. Become a doctor. Stay on the straight and narrow path. Promise me." Elara's tears soaked into the hospital sheets. She squeezed her mother's hand as if she could hold her back from the brink of death. "I promise, Mama." Her mother smiled, a fragile, relieved smile, as if that promise was the only thing she needed to hear to finally let go of this life. 3 days later, Irina passed away in her sleep. And Elara lost the warmest part of her soul. Her mother wasn't just a parent. She was the place Elara returned to after every long day. She was the only person who could look past the grades, the pressure, and the heavy expectations on Elara's shoulders and say, "You've worked hard enough. You don't have to be perfect." She was the only one who made Alara feel loved, not for her talent, but simply for who she was. When her mother died, the void left behind wasn't just grief. It was a dull, deep, and freezing emptiness that would follow Alara for years to come. In the months that followed, she buried herself in her studies. She worked until midnight, then until dawn, reading until her eyes burned so much she could no longer see the words. Only when her mind was drowned in textbooks, medical theories, and clinical terms could she stop thinking about the sensation of her mother's hand turning cold in hers. She studied to forget the pain. She studied so her mother could look down and smile. She studied to honor that final promise made by the deathbed. But in the process, Alara forgot something crucial. She also needed to be loved, not just transformed into a more perfect version of herself. But her father couldn't give her that kind of love. It wasn't that he didn't love her. He just loved her in his own way, harsh, cold, and entirely controlling. He taught her strength. He taught her how to think. He taught her exactly what talent meant and what it took to be superior. He taught her how to stand on her own 2 feet. But sometimes, an 18-year-old girl who had just lost her mother didn't need to be strong. She just needed to be held and allowed to be weak. Her father never knew how to do that. Dr. Konstantin Volkov was once the pride of Belgrade Medical University, a leading neurosurgeon hailed by The Lancet as the genius of the new generation. But then, her mother fell ill. When Irina was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer that had already metastasized, Konstantin changed. Alara remembered that night clearly. She was only 15. Her father sat in his darkened office, her mother's medical records spread before him, and a half-finished glass of whiskey in his hand. His fingers trembled slightly around the glass. He told her that mainstream medicine was nothing but an iron cage. Protocols, guidelines, insurance approvals, rules and limits dictated by people who weren't the ones dying every day. He wanted to try a new therapy for her mother, but the system wouldn't allow it. He was the head of neurosurgery, yet he couldn't save the woman he loved because of red tape. "So, I've made a decision," he said, his voice low and hard. "I'm going outside the system." And he did. Truly. He left the hospital and opened an underground operating room in their basement. He worked for the underworld mafia dons, drug lords, men with endless money and zero regard for the law. He performed brain surgeries to switch off fear. He implanted electrodes to control emotions. He brewed distorted morphine to erase pain permanently. He made millions. He used that money to put Alara through school, to pay for her mother's treatments, and to build a world where his talent was no longer shackled by the system. But in the end, Irina died anyway. After her death, Konstantin never looked back. He said only one thing, with a chilling calmness: "I have seen freedom. I cannot go back to the iron cage." The most painful memory for Alara was one Christmas when she was 26. She was in her second year of residency and had returned to Belgrade for a few days. Her father invited her down to the basement to watch him work. Alara followed, partly out of curiosity and partly out of a naive hope that maybe things weren't as bad as she imagined. Maybe he just wanted to show her new equipment. Maybe it was just research. But when she stepped into that sterile, bone-chilling white room, the surgical lights blinding, the stainless steel table cold, the air smelling of ice, she saw a man lying motionless under anesthesia, his head fixed in a metal frame. Her father was implanting electrodes into the man's amygdala. "What are you doing, Papa?" The question came out as a choked whisper. Her father didn't even look up, turning off his fear. This client wants to be the perfect assassin. Alara backed away toward the door, her entire body turning cold. But Konstantin continued his work as if everything were perfectly normal. He even invited her to join him. 30% of the profits. Millions a year. Freedom from hospital politics. "I can't," Alara's voice shook. "Mama wouldn't want this." "Finally," he replied, but his voice was cold to the bone. "Your mother is dead. She died because mainstream medicine couldn't save her." Tenek. Alara turned and ran from that basement. And from that day on, she never went back. Their relationship became painfully complex. The hardest part was that he wasn't a simple monster. He wasn't someone she could easily hate and cut off. He loved her. He truly loved her. He raised her alone after her mother died. He had taught her medicine since she was 10, from brain diagrams to neural mechanisms, from pattern recognition to the grounding techniques for phantom pain. When Alara got into Johns Hopkins, he cried. It was the only time she had ever seen him cry after her mother passed away. But love doesn't mean you're right, and talent doesn't make you innocent. Constantine wanted her to follow in his footsteps. Alara, however, didn't want to change the world by turning men into monsters. She wanted to heal. When she refused him for the last time, he wasn't angry. He was just sad. "One day," he said, "you will understand." Alara left Belgrade and flew to New York. She changed her last name to her mother's cross. She opened a record shop, and she tried her best to forget her father. But she couldn't, because every time she looked in the mirror, she saw his emerald eyes in her own face, intelligent, sharp, and decisive. She was terrified that one day she would become him. So, she ran. Reverie Records and Coffee, West Village, New York. For the past 2 years, Alara's life had drifted in a loop that was so peaceful it was almost tedious. She opened the shop at 5 p.m., brewed coffee, sold vinyl records, hosted jazz listening sessions on Friday nights, closed the doors at 10 p.m. Then, she would go up to the second floor, lie in bed, and read neurology journals until her eyes grew heavy. It was a small, steady, and safe rhythm, a fortress of peace she had painstakingly built for herself after the wreckage of her past. But even after leaving medicine, Alara couldn't truly stop seeing the world through a doctor's eyes. Her brain simply didn't know how to switch off. She would watch a customer walk in and immediately notice a slight limp, likely a lingering effect of an old knee injury. She watched the way they breathed shallow and short, and thought of asthma or chronic anxiety. She noticed the slight tremor in their fingers as they held a coffee cup and automatically thought of early-stage Parkinson's. She couldn't stop observing. She couldn't shut down the medical eye that had become her reflex. But she could choose not to act. She could choose to just keep selling records, to brew coffee, to live a simple life. Reverie Records and Coffee had been opened with a $150,000 loan. After 2 years, Alara had paid back 2/3 of it, but she still owed $50,000, amounting to $2,000 every month. The shop earned about $4,000 to $5,000 monthly. After expenses, she had just enough to survive. She wasn't rich, she wasn't wealthy, but she had enough. And more importantly, she was free. No one gave her orders, no one forced her to do things she hated. No father, no hospital, no sterile, white-lit corridors. Just her, the vinyl records, the scent of coffee, the amber glow of the shop, and the fragile peace she held on to every single day. 1 week ago, her father called. It was 11 at night. The Belgrade number flashed on the screen, making Alara freeze for a long time before she answered. Finally, she picked up. Alara. His voice was deep and warm, carrying the full weight of the affection he always placed in her name. But as always, Alara's reply was short. "Hello, Papa. How are you?" "I'm fine. How is the shop?" "It's going well, Papa." A long silence followed. Then, her father asked how much she still owed the bank. He was still watching her. He knew she had taken out a loan. He knew she was struggling with the debt. And as always, he wanted to help. Alara cut him off. She didn't need it. She could handle it herself. Her voice was colder than she intended. "Are you still angry with me?" Angry? Yes, but it wasn't just anger. Deep down, Alara understood why he chose that path. She understood his desperation as he watched her mother fade away. She understood that everything he did was rooted in love. But understanding didn't mean acceptance. "I'm not angry, Papa. I just need time. I need to live my own life." On the other end of the line, her father was silent for a few seconds, before saying he would always be there if she needed anything. Then his voice dropped, turning softer, almost weary. "I hope you find someone to love soon. Don't live in loneliness like I do. Don't let your talent and your past lock you away. You deserve to be happy." Alara couldn't answer. Her tears were already falling. He continued slowly. "And if you ever want to return to medicine, whether you follow me or choose the traditional path, I will support you, because you are my pride." "I know, Papa." After she hung up, Alara sat alone in the dark for a long time, clutching the phone to her chest and crying. She missed him, but at the same time, she knew she couldn't go back. For years, Alara hadn't dated anyone. She didn't let anyone get close. She didn't allow any man into her life long enough to ask the questions she didn't want to answer. Because if they knew who she was, the daughter of Konstantin Volkov, the fallen genius of Belgrade, the woman who walked away from medicine when she was one step away from the finish line, they would ask, why? And Alara didn't know how to answer that without telling the most painful story of her life. So she lived alone, sold records, brewed coffee, read medical journals every night as a way to hold on to the last piece of herself, the piece she never truly wanted to let go. Until tonight. Until Nicholas walked into her shop carrying 3 bullets, phantom pain, and a look of such deep loneliness that Alara found it almost impossible to ignore. Until she saw in that man not just someone strong, dangerous, and bloodstained, but someone in pain, someone desperate, someone quietly seeking help in the only way he knew how. And something inside her was awakened. Not just the hands of a doctor, but a resonance between 2 souls carrying the same heavy burdens. Loneliness, escape, and the yearning to be truly seen by someone. The Aston Martin sliced through the Manhattan night like a black blade. 3 a.m. The city streets were ghostly quiet, save for the low, guttural growl of the V12 engine and the scent of drying blood rising from his ruined designer shirt. Nicholas caught his reflection in the rearview mirror, a man with the sharp, jagged features of the Kovac bloodline, his silver-gray eyes as cold as forged steel. Beneath that shirt lay 3 bullet wounds and a row of stitches done raw, without a drop of anesthesia. To any other man, it would be a living nightmare. To him, it was just another set of statistics. No pain, no sensation. Until that damn phantom pain had flared up mid-drive, forcing him to pull over at the only place still holding on to a sliver of light in the dead of night. Reverie Records and coffee. The place was a stark contrast to the scent of gunpowder he carried with him. It was warm, thick with the smell of aged wood, vinyl, and bitter espresso. And there, he had found her Alara. In the underworld, women were usually just glittering ornaments or political pawns. But this woman, she was a symphony of elegance and lethality. Those emerald eyes hadn't looked at him with the trembling terror of a victim. She had looked at him as if she were deciphering a complex medical equation. When he had slammed into that oak counter and blood spilled out a red insult to his own perceived immortality, she hadn't flinched. She remained unnervingly calm. You're not hurting where the wound is. You're hurting somewhere else. Damn. That sentence had hit the mark more accurately than a Chechen bullet. That girl behind the counter, with her hair pulled back and the steady hands of a genius, had looked straight into the black hole Nicholas had spent 12 years trying to hide. She had stitched him up with the precision of an artist and the coldness of an executioner. Yet beneath it all lay a purity of spirit that felt almost like an insult to a man like him. She possessed hands that were never meant to pull espresso shots. Those hands were born to hold the strings of fate over an operating table. And then she had touched him. The way Alara laced her fingers through his to perform that grounding technique, it wasn't just a medical procedure, it was an invasion. For the first time, the chaotic fire alarm screaming in his brain fell silent. The warmth from her palm seeped into his very cells, re-anchoring a Nicholas Kovac who had been drifting away in a storm of illusions. She hadn't just saved his life. She had found the control switch for the monster inside him. Nicholas floored the accelerator, the speedometer climbing past 100 miles per hour. His coastal villa was already in sight, but his mind was still back on West 4th Street. He reached for his phone and hit speed dial for his right hand. "Boss," Tomas's voice answered, laced with surprise at the early hour. "The girl who owns the record shop on the corner of West 4th, Nicholas commanded, his voice as sharp as clashing steel. "I want everything. Her residency files from Johns Hopkins, the real reason she quit medicine, and exactly how much she owes the bank. Anyone she's ever touched, I want their names." He paused for a beat, his eyes fixed on the infinite black of the road ahead. 48 hours. Don't be late. I don't like variables I can't control, especially not a woman who can read me that easily." He hung up. A mafia boss should never have feelings for his doctor. But Alara wasn't just a doctor. She was a dangerous variable. And Nicholas? He had never been able to resist danger. He tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, the glow from the dashboard illuminating the cold face of a man who had walked out of the jaws of death. Alara had seen a man who felt no pain, But she didn't know that the absence of pain was exactly what made him the predator at the top of the Manhattan food chain. In a world governed by blood and shadow, pain is a shackle, a human weakness. And Nicholas? He had broken those chains a long time ago. He glanced down at the dried blood on his right side, the numbness of his disconnected nerves settling back in. Memories of the warehouse fight in Brooklyn a few hours prior began to play back like a slow-motion film. A scene where bullets tore into flesh like harmless rain. And he, the man without limits, had walked through the storm with the ruthless indifference of a god who knew no fear. The bullet that tore into his right side barely made Nicholas miss a beat. He looked down. Crimson was spreading rapidly across the canvas of his white shirt. The only sensation was a patch of dampness, a creeping chill. No sting, no burning. "Boss, you're hit!" Tomas roared, his weapon still spitting lead. Nicholas didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the Chechen gunman trembling behind the corner of the warehouse, 5 meters away. The man turned deathly pale as he watched Nicholas advance, standing tall and looming like an unstoppable machine. The gunman squeezed the trigger frantically. One bullet grazed Nicholas's left shoulder, another buried itself deep into his right thigh. Nicholas didn't even break his stride. The gunman dropped his weapon and turned to run, a fatal mistake. In 5 steps, Nicholas caught him by the scruff of the neck and hoisted him off the ground. The man clawed at him, his fingernails ripping through the skin of Nicholas's arms, blood streaming down to his elbows. But Nicholas's brain remained silent. Absolute, haunting silence. You're a monster," the man wheezed, his eyes bulging just before his windpipe was crushed. Nicholas tossed the body onto the cement floor like a piece of trash. Tomas stood frozen, watching him with a look that was a volatile mix of reverence and terror. "Call the doctor," Nicholas commanded, his voice as calm as if he had only suffered a paper cut. 3 bullet wounds, a pool of blood, and a brain that felt nothing. That was Nicholas's power, but he knew. He knew that in a few hours, when his brain began to replay these injuries in the form of phantom pain, he would pay the price, a pain with no source, no cure. All he could do was survive it. 7 in the evening. Upper East Side. Dr. Morrison pulled the final stitch tight, his hand trembling slightly as he cut the thread. It was the 12th stitch of the afternoon. "Are you sure you don't need morphine, Mr. Kovac?" "I don't need it." The doctor packed his bag, stole one last glance at Nicholas, and retreated toward the door. In his eyes, Nicholas wasn't a patient. He was a biological weapon. The long oak dining table of the Kovac family was always overflowing with fine wine and dark conspiracies. His father Miro sat at the head. His mother sat to the right, and Adrian, his twin brother, sat in a titanium wheelchair to the left. Adrian was animatedly discussing the ambush tactics at the Williamsburg Bridge. His eyes were bright. He was the mind. Nicholas was the blade. Together, the two brothers were the perfect duo of the Manhattan underworld. Nicholas watched Adrian, seeing that he looked okay, his smile still genuine. But he knew the truth. The chronic pain from Adrian's paralyzed legs haunted his brother like a ghost. Adrian always took painkillers before dinner just to maintain the image of the steel strategist. Their father raised a glass of champagne. "Victory belongs to the Kovacs. Brooklyn is in our pocket." "It was all thanks to Adrian's strategy," Nicholas said, raising his glass and shifting the spotlight to his brother. Miro laughed loudly and clapped Adrian on the shoulder. Their mother smiled with quiet satisfaction. The sound of crystal clinking was crisp and warm. Nicholas drained his glass, feeling the icy liquid slide down his throat. Seeing Adrian happy made it all worth it. At least in this room, everything had to function perfectly. 10 o'clock. The party ended. Nicholas drove back to his penthouse, alone. It was time to face the darkness. Midnight. The 58th floor balcony. The Manhattan wind howled past his shoulders. Nicholas stood looking down at the glittering city, feeling the familiar numbness take hold of his body. It all began when he was 20. The Bradva had snatched him, locking him in a dark cellar and torturing him for 72 hours. Electric shocks, broken fingers, hot blades. They wanted the location of his father's armory. Nicholas never broke, because after 48 hours, his brain tripped its own circuit breaker to save itself from total collapse. When his father finally rescued him, Nicholas was nothing but a heap of broken flesh. Miro Kovac called Dr. Konstantin Volkov a mad genius whose medical license had been revoked. Volkov injected a substance into Nicholas's spinal cord, known as Formula 47. It will help the boy recover without having to endure the agony, Volkov had said. He was right. Nicholas recovered miraculously, but Volkov never mentioned that he had permanently severed the body's warning system. For 12 years, Nicholas had taken bullets, broken bones, and suffered internal ruptures without even knowing it. 6 months ago, he had nearly died from internal bleeding after a fight with the triads, simply because he didn't feel enough pain to stop. Pain is the root of fear. To be painless is to be fearless. On the battlefield, he was immortal, but in daily life, he was a blind man walking a tightrope. 12:34 a.m., the phantom pain struck. It didn't start at the wounds. It started from everywhere. His entire body felt trapped in a cocoon made of shattered glass, every muscle being wrung dry. His brain was panicking. It knew the body was damaged, but since it couldn't pinpoint the location, it broadcasted an emergency signal to his entire nervous system. Nicholas sat on the floor, leaning his back against the glass, counting his breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4. The pain radiated, vast, without a center. 2.5 more hours. He just had to hold on for 2.5 more hours. The world outside kept spinning, the yellow lights kept blinking, and no one cared that he was being torn apart in silence. Nicholas would be fine. He was always fine. But that night, the phantom pain returned mid-drive, more sudden and violent than ever before. That was the reason he pulled over at a small record shop with a dim amber light, the place where a girl sat reading a medical textbook at 2 in the morning. The man who couldn't feel pain had finally found the one person who could read his agony. That was the reason for their first encounter. 3 days had passed since the blood-stained man first stepped into Reverie Records. For 3 nights, Alara hadn't slept a wink. It wasn't fear that kept her awake. It was the fact that she couldn't stop thinking about him. Nicholas. Alara sat behind the bar, her hands wrapped around a cup of cold espresso. Her copy of Principles of Neuroscience lay open in front of her, but her eyes weren't following the lines. Her gaze kept drifting toward the brown leather sofa by the window, the spot where Nicholas had sat that night, hunched over, drenched in sweat, his hands trembling. The memory played on a loop in her mind. She couldn't quite put her finger on why that night had left such a mark on her. Perhaps it was because that encounter had awakened the dormant hands of a doctor. That moment, she placed her palm against his, feeling his chaotic heart rate stabilize under her guidance. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in 2 years of selling records and brewing coffee. It reminded her that her hands weren't made for wiping counters. They were made to heal. And that feeling of being useful, of being exactly where she was meant to be, was dangerously addictive. It made her crave it again, to touch someone in pain and say, "I can help." Or perhaps it was because she felt a tremor of recognition in his soul. Nicholas was lonely. Alara had seen it from the very first moment. Deep within those silver-gray eyes, hidden behind the walls of cold strength, a vast emptiness that he didn't know how to fill. And Alara, she carried a similar void within herself. 2 years of living alone, dating no one, hiding her entire past behind a bar. She and this man were more alike than she cared to admit. 2 fugitives, crossing paths in a record shop at 2 in the morning. Or maybe it was simply that Nicholas was the most peculiar guest she had ever encountered. 3 bullets in his body, blood soaking through his shirt, and yet, not a flinch, not a groan, not a plea for help. He had just walked in and said he needed to sit for a moment, his voice hauntingly calm. Who could survive 3 bullets and feel no pain? In 4 years at Johns Hopkins, Alara had never read a case like it. And that case had sat right in front of her, drinking warm water and listening to Chopin before vanishing into the Manhattan night in an Aston Martin. 3 reasons. Maybe they were 1. Maybe they were all 3. Or maybe it was something she didn't yet dare to name. Alara shook her head and took a sip of the cold coffee. She told herself to stop. He was just a guest, a man covered in blood who appeared at 2 a.m. He would likely never return. But something, be it a doctor's intuition, a woman's instinct, or perhaps both, whispered a different story. He will be back. Because when someone finally sees the pain you've been carrying, you don't just forget them. That evening, at 8 o'clock, the shop bell chimed again. Nicholas walked in. This time, there was no blood. He was no longer the wounded beast of 3 nights ago. He wore a sharp black suit, a white shirt with no tie, and his hair was slicked back neatly. He looked entirely different on the first night. He was a broken creature crawling into a sanctuary. Tonight, he was a king, stepping into his own territory. Alara smiled, and then she realized she had smiled before she even had time to think. Nicholas sat at the bar, as natural as if it were his usual spot. Alara brewed 2 espressos and set them down. Steam rose between them, carrying the bitter scent of coffee and the aged aroma of vinyl. Nicholas took a sip, set the cup down, and looked her dead in the eye with a gaze that had a question ready before he even walked through the door. "Why did you quit medicine?" The question hit Alara's chest like a heavy stone. For 2 years, old friends thought she was just stressed. Customers thought she was just a girl who liked records. No one dug deeper. But Nicholas, a total stranger, was staring directly at the thing she hid most. Alara set her cup down and remained silent for a long time. Then, she sighed and told him. She spoke of her exhaustion with the system. That medicine wasn't just about healing, it was politics, insurance, power, and memories too painful to face. She had fled from it all to find something simpler. But Nicholas didn't let the story end there. "But are you truly at peace?" The question was soft, but sharp as a scalpel, slicing through the armor Alara had spent 2 years building. And she was forced to admit that no, she wasn't. Nicholas said the one thing she hadn't dared to voice, that on that night, when she helped him, her doctor's brain had automatically woken up. For the first time in 2 years, Alara felt like a doctor again. Her throat tightened. He was right, every word of it. Nicholas was the first person to truly ask her why. No one else had wanted to understand. People just thought she was crazy or selfish, or they just moved on. But not him. He wanted to understand. And that made Alara drop her guard more than she ever intended. Nicholas leaned forward, serious, but not rushed. "Alara, I want to make you an offer. Not employment, a partnership." Alara waited in silence. "I need you to help me navigate the phantom pain a few times a week. The grounding technique you used that night worked 10 times better than anything I've ever tried. Morphine is useless. Meditation is useless. But 3 minutes with you, the pain dropped from a 10 to a 3. No $1 million doctor could do that." Nicholas paused, his voice dropping an octave. "And I think you need this too. You have a phenomenal medical talent going to waste behind this bar. You miss the feeling of healing I saw it in your eyes that night. If you help me, you aren't just saving me from the phantom pain. You're saving yourself from burying the very thing you were born to do." Alara looked at him, her voice cautious. "You want to hire me?" "No. A partnership. You are the expert. I am the patient. Equals. And I want to make sure you don't have to worry about money while we do this, so you can focus on helping me instead of worrying about bank loans." The blood in Alara's veins seemed to freeze. "You know about my loan?" Nicholas didn't flinch. He admitted he had investigated her. He knew about the $150,000 debt, the $50,000 remaining, and the $2,000 monthly payments. He even knew her bank statements. He apologized for the intrusion, but in his world, trust didn't come easily. He needed to know who she was before letting her touch his most vulnerable parts. The feeling of being exposed, not physically, but her entire life, made Alara both afraid and angry. Her voice turned cold. "So who are you? What kind of job allows you to investigate people like that?" Nicholas was silent for a few seconds. He took a deep breath and said slowly, "My name is Nicholas Kovac. I run the Kovac family, one of the 3 largest mafia organizations in New York." Alara's face went pale. Mafia, the underworld, violence. Just like her father, she refused him immediately. Her father had worked for that world, using medicine to serve those who lived by blood. The image of her father in that Belgrade basement white coat, scalpel in hand, eyes cold, flashed in her mind with painful clarity. She had run from that. She couldn't step onto that path again. But Nicholas wasn't angry. He wasn't even disappointed. He just placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to decide now. Just think about it. Let me learn grounding from you. No money, no deals. Just I learn, you teach." Alara hesitated, then asked something she wasn't sure why she wanted to know. Are you being patient with me, just for the grounding, or is it something else? Nicholas looked at her for a long time before answering. I feel something in you that's like me, a void in the soul. You deserve a better choice. A void in the soul. No one had ever called it that. No one had ever seen it so clearly. Alara turned away. I'm sorry, Nico. I need time to think. That's enough for today. She retreated to the back of the shop, leaving him alone. But as she leaned against the back wall, she realized her heart was beating much faster than usual. She had wanted to know who he was. And now that she did, she didn't want to believe it. A mafia boss. A world identical to the one she had fled. But it seemed she couldn't run forever. Life was forcing her to face her demons. It was hard to fathom why a mafia don would need a normal, broken girl like her. Alara knew Nicholas wouldn't stop here, but she also knew she had said no, and that had to be the end of it. At least, that's what she thought then. 4 days later, Alara realized that a final decision is often just a fragile illusion. On Tuesday afternoon, 2 men walked in. Alara knew immediately they weren't customers. It was in the way they moved, ignoring the menu, ignoring the records, eyes only on her. The leader was middle-aged and bald, wearing a black leather jacket and 3 heavy gold rings. The man behind him was younger and bigger, his hands deep in his pockets as if gripping something hidden. The bald man sat at the bar without ordering. He looked around the shop slowly, as if appraising the value of the walls. Nice place, he said, his Eastern European accent thick. This area belongs to Yuri. You've been open 2 years and haven't paid protection. Yuri is a nice guy, so he let it slide. But now, he wants to collect. Alara kept her voice steady. I don't know who Yuri is, and I don't pay protection money. The man barked a dry, humorless laugh. Just because you don't know doesn't mean you don't owe. He stood up, walked to a vinyl shelf, and picked up a copy of Miles Davis's Kind of Blue, a first pressing Alara had bought for $800. He spun the record in his hand and let it drop. The clatter of the record hitting the wooden floor sounded like a gunshot in the quiet shop. $5,000 a month, starting next week, if not. He glanced around. This place is flammable. Lots of wood, lots of vinyl. All it takes is one little spark. Alara gripped her towel under the counter. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she didn't tremble. Not out of courage, but out of fury. A fury so hot, it pushed the fear down. Get out of my shop. The man raised an eyebrow, surprised. Then he laughed harder, turning to the heavy behind him. Hear that? Feisty one. He leaned over the counter, his face inches from hers. His breath smelled of cigarettes and cheap liquor. Next week, 5,000. Or, this place is ash. They turned and walked out. The bell chimed. Normally, Alara loved that sound, but this time, it sounded like a countdown. When the door closed, she was alone. And that was when her hands began to shake, a violent tremor she had suppressed while they were there. Alara collapsed behind the counter, hugging her knees, forcing herself to breathe the way she had taught Nicholas. In for 4, out for 7. 5,000 a month. Her shop only made 4 to 5,000 total. After expenses, she barely broke even. 5,000 in protection meant bankruptcy. It meant losing her shop. It meant losing the only sanctuary she had built. She thought about calling the police, but she had heard enough stories from other shop owners. Half of them belonged to Yuri. Calling the police was often just calling the very people threatening you. She thought about selling, running away again, just like Belgrade, just like her father, always running. And then, in a moment that disgusted her, she thought of Nicholas. Not because she wanted to beg for help, but because, ironically, he was the only person she knew who could handle this. And that thought made her angrier at herself than at the thugs. Alara hugged her knees tighter. The shop fell into silence. The Miles Davis record still lay on the floor, and she truly didn't know what to do. But someone did know what to do. Tomas Nicholas's right hand had been watching the shop since day one, under orders. Not to spy on Alara, but to protect her, even if she didn't know it, and even if she wouldn't have agreed to it. When the thugs came, Tomas was in a black SUV across the street. He saw everything. Tomas called Nicholas immediately, but Alara didn't know that until 3 days later. For those 3 days, she lived in a quiet, persistent dread. It wasn't movie fear, no screaming or crying. It was a fear that seeped into every hour of her day. Every time she opened the door, her heart raced. Every chime of the bell made her jump. Every shadow passing the window sent a chill down her spine. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't focus. She once made coffee and forgot to put the beans in the machine. On Friday afternoon, the deadline, the door opened. The bald man walked in. This time he had 2 others with him. One stood by the door. He sat at the bar and tapped his fingers on the wood. 5,000. You got it? Alara stood behind the counter, her back straight, but she was the only one who knew how much she was trembling. She didn't have $5,000. She had no one on her side. Plu. She only had... The door opened, not with a normal chime, but a soft, oiled sound. And Nicholas Kovac walked in. He wasn't wearing a suit, just a black shirt, sleeves rolled up, black trousers, no visible weapons, no guards, just him, walking slowly, precisely the walk of a man who doesn't need to hurry because the room already belongs to him before he even enters. The man by the door froze instantly, not because Nicholas was bigger, but because he recognized him. His eyes went from aggression to sheer terror in a heartbeat. Nicholas didn't look at him. He didn't even look at Alara. He walked straight to the bar and stopped next to the bald man. He didn't stand opposite him, he stood beside him, the way one stands next to someone who isn't a threat worth facing. He looked down at the man and spoke in a low, terrifyingly calm voice. This shop belongs to me. 3 words, no shouting, no gun, no threats needed. The bald man went pale. He looked at Nicholas, then at Alara, then back to Nicholas, his mouth working, but no sound coming out. Nicholas continued, his voice steady. Go tell Yuri that the West Village from West 4th to Christopher Street is under the protection of the Kovac family. Starting today. The man bolted almost instantly. His 2 goons were out the door before him. A few seconds later, they were gone. The bell chimed, and silence returned. Nicholas stood still for a moment. Then he turned to Alara. Are you okay? Alara knew she should feel grateful. And she was. But the first emotion that flared up wasn't gratitude. It was anger. I didn't need your protection, she said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. I didn't ask you. I don't want to owe you. Nicholas looked at her. No anger, no hurt, just that calm gaze. It was just a few threats. You don't owe me anything. Then how did you know? Tomas has been watching the shop since I met you. It's a habit of mine protecting what I care about. You can hate it. But if Tomas hadn't been there on Tuesday... Nicholas glanced at the Miles Davis record, now back on the shelf. Today you would have lost more than $5,000. Alara went silent. She knew he was right, and she hated it. She hated that the world didn't just run on medicine and espresso. Sometimes it needed power. Sometimes it needed a shield big enough to stop the rot. And the girl in the West Village, no matter how strong or independent, had no shield other than a thin glass door and a chime. Nicholas sat in the same chair he had occupied on the first night. I didn't come here to demand you agree to anything, he said. I came because someone threatened you. It's done. I'm leaving. He stood up and turned toward the door. Nick. He stopped, but didn't turn right away. Sit down. Let me make you an espresso. Nicholas turned back. For the first time since he walked in, the corner of his mouth curved up slightly. It wasn't quite a smile, but the shadow of one. It was enough. He sat back down. Alara started the machine. As the grinder hummed, she thought that the wall between them was still there, but a small crack had formed. It wasn't words that did it. It was seeing MAFIA power do what she couldn't do for herself in 2 years, protect the place she called home. And the man using that power hadn't done it to destroy or control, but to pick a Miles Davis record up off the floor and put it back where it belonged. Alara set the espresso in front of him. He took a sip, and they sat in silence in the small West Village shop on a Friday afternoon between 2 worlds that were supposed to be opposites, but were slowly touching. For the first time, she began to see something she had previously refused to look at, that power has more than one face. Nicholas returned to the shop every night after that, but Alara no longer saw him through her old lens. She started asking him questions about the family, his men, the underworld, not out of fear, but curiosity. And then, one evening, he pulled a photo from his coat pocket. "I want to tell you a story. May I?" Alara looked at the photo. A large man with a scarred face was hugging a girl around 8 years old with blonde braids. The girl was smiling brightly, clutching a teddy bear. But Alara's medical eye immediately saw the signs. Her skin was paler than it should be. Dark circles under her eyes, her lips slightly blue. The smile couldn't hide the exhaustion of chronic illness. "This is Mila," Nicholas began. 8 years old. Congenital mitral valve regurgitation. She's waiting for surgery. W, 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 W. He spoke slowly, opening a door into his world. Mila needed a $120,000 operation. Insurance only covered 60%. Her family was 50,000 short, a number they could never reach. Her mother had left when she was 3. Now, it was just the father in the photo. "What does her father do?" Alara asked, her eyes fixed on the image. Nicholas looked at her. "That's the interesting part. Guess." Alara looked at the man. Broad shoulders, scarred face, large calloused hands with misaligned knuckles, signs of a man who had fought many times. "He fights," she replied. "Exactly. Anton, my bodyguard. A hired fighter. Violence. Blood." Nicholas paused. "For Mila." Alara was silent. "The man looks like a thug," Nicholas said softly. "The law calls him a criminal, but in his daughter's eyes, he is a hero. And the truth? He is a hero. Not to the world, but to his daughter. He didn't choose the darkness because he liked it. He chose it because he had no other choice." He looked directly at Alara. He didn't say more. He just sipped his espresso, letting the silence do the work. And Alara understood. She understood why he was telling her this. It wasn't because Anton was interesting. It was because Anton was like her father. A man using violence to save his daughter. A man performing illegal surgeries to save the woman he loved. 2 men in different worlds, driven by the same desperation. Alara set the photo down, looking at Mila's smiling face. A child who had no idea what her father had traded to keep her alive. Just like Alara years ago. Just like her at 15, having no idea her father was operating on criminals in a basement to pay for her mother's cancer treatments. "You told me that story for a reason," Alara said. Nicholas nodded. "I wanted you to see that the world isn't as simple as you think. Not everyone in the darkness is evil. And you refuse to help me because you're afraid of being like your father. But are you really? Your father implants chips in assassins. You heal my phantom pain with the warmth of your hand. Those are 2 very different things." Alara said nothing. She just looked at her hands. He was right. A week later, the wall between them had thinned significantly. 2 years behind the bar, Alara had met thousands of faces, but they were all just fragments. An espresso, a record, a chime, a closing door, and they were gone. She never knew the stories behind them. She had thought the world was binary, but Anton and Mila had shown her the vast gray areas she had been too afraid to enter. Nicholas had been patient, answering every question she had. And now, he invited her to dinner. He came to the shop on Friday night and spoke plainly. He knew she had built a wall. He knew he represented the world she feared, but he hoped she understood him a little better now. He wasn't a monster, just a man living in a complex reality. "So, would you have dinner with me to let me thank you? For helping me? For seeing me?" Alara didn't agree immediately. Her mind was racing with questions her life as a record seller hadn't prepared her for. "What is dinner with a mafia boss like?" she asked, half curious, half wary. "Will there be guards? Do we go through the back door? Will you buy out the restaurant so no one sees?" Nicholas laughed, a rare, warm laugh that smoothed out the tired lines around his eyes. "No, just two people having dinner. Normal. Tomas will drive, but he stays outside. No guards at the table, no guns on the cloth. Just wine and steak. And if someone recognizes you, then they see Nicholas Kovac having dinner with a beautiful woman. I have nothing to hide." The weight of that sentence hit Alara harder than his calm tone. Her whole life was a series of secrets, hiding her past, her father, her reasons. And here was a man from the underworld telling her he had nothing to hide. "Okay," Alara said. "I agree." Saturday night. La Cuckoo, Soho. When she stepped out of the taxi, Alara was wearing a navy silk dress, a soft V-neck with a slit on the right. Her hair fell in soft waves, her lips a gentle coral red. For the first time in 2 years, she felt beautiful. Not for anyone else, but for herself. For the first time, she wanted to be seen. Nicholas looked at her and said simply, "You're beautiful." Alara smiled, feeling herself flush. "Thank you. It's been a while since I bothered with makeup." The restaurant was bathed in candlelight and the soft notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune. They sat at a corner table overlooking Soho. Nicholas ordered a 2015 Chateau Margaux. Alara teased him about the prices on the menu. "It's expensive here. I'll have to order the most expensive thing." Nicholas smirked. "I'd be delighted if you did." The atmosphere was strangely light. The wall hadn't been torn down. It had just grown thin enough for the breeze to pass through. As the wine was poured, Nicholas raised his glass. "To finding yourself again. To finding your love for medicine. And to knowing you don't have to choose between light and dark. You only have to choose healing." Alara clinked her glass against his. "Thank you for being patient, for helping me see what I didn't want to see." Over Wagyu steak and butter lemon salmon, Alara found herself admitting things she never thought she'd say. She talked about Anton and Mila. She talked about realizing her view of the world had been too extreme. She thought about her father. For 2 years, she had been angry at him. But she had never asked, if she were in his shoes watching the woman she loved die while medicine stood idle, would she have done anything differently? "I don't know," Alara whispered. "Maybe I would have been just as desperate. Love can make people do unforgivable things." Nicholas reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm. He told her she didn't have to forgive her father yet. She just had to understand. And more importantly, she had to understand that she wasn't him. She had a choice. She could return to medicine on her own terms. A doctor treating a mafia boss isn't condoning crime. They are upholding the Hippocratic Oath to heal without distinction. "You don't need to choose light or dark," Nicholas said. "You only need to choose between healing and harming, and I believe you will always choose healing." Alara couldn't argue. He was right. Since childhood, the loss of her mother and the pressure of her talent had made her rigid. She thought her moral cage was keeping her safe, but it was just another cage, quieter, but equally suffocating. "Maybe it's time I stepped outside," she said, wiping a tear. "Thank you for telling me what I needed to hear, not just what I wanted to hear." Then, Nicholas pulled a small box from his jacket. Inside was a Withings ScanWatch Horizon Navy dial, black leather strap, heart rate, blood pressure, SpO2, ECG. Alara knew the meaning before he explained it. "I've read about this. How did you know?" Nicholas placed his hand over hers. "Because I know you still love medicine. This gift is just to remind you, you are still a doctor. That is your true self, not a record seller. A doctor finding her way back." Alara's throat tightened. She held the watch in her hands, a wave of emotion hitting her so hard she could barely breathe. For 2 years, people had told her, "You made your choice. Now accept it." Only Nicholas said, "You can choose again." And that was exactly what she needed to hear. "If you need me, if the phantom pain comes back, If you need grounding, call me, Alara said, looking him in the eye. I'll help. Not for money, not out of obligation, because I want to. Nicholas's silver eyes softened visibly in the candlelight. Are you sure? Alara didn't answer with words. She just smiled and held his gaze. It was enough. Their hands remained joined amidst the flickering candles and the fading Debussy. For the first time, they weren't strangers. They were two people healing together. And from that night on, it didn't stop. For the next 2 months, they met more and more. Not just at the shop, but everywhere. A small ramen shop in the East Village, a jazz night at the Blue Note, morning walks along the High Line. Every empty space in their lives was being filled. Nicholas remembered she liked lavender over roses. He remembered her allergies. He remembered she liked one sugar in her tea but none in her espresso. He was warmer than she ever expected. Or perhaps he had always been that way, and she was the only one close enough to notice. Alara didn't know exactly when the feeling shifted. Maybe it was the night he stood in the rain outside her shop, smiling when she walked out. Maybe it was the night the phantom pain passed and neither of them wanted to let go of the other's hand. She couldn't name what was growing between them, but she knew it was no longer doctor and patient. It was deeper, warmer, and more terrifying. Because for the first time in her life, she was afraid of losing someone, and she would soon learn that her fear was far from groundless. Monday morning. As usual, Nicholas sat in his office, reviewing the third quarter financial reports. The door swung open. Tomas stepped in, his face pale as a ghost. Boss, you need to see this. He placed a small, dark wooden box on the desk. No label, no return address. Nicholas looked up, his gaze sharpening. Who sent it? We're not sure. It was left at the villa gates this morning. Nicholas stared at the box. Something was wrong. He opened the lid slowly, cautiously. Inside lay a single black rose withered, its petals dry, its stem thick with thorns. Tucked beside it was a small card, with a message handwritten in deep red ink. The fairest rose in the garden is always the first to be plucked. V. Nicholas went rigid. V. IEC. Viktor Volkov, the Bratva king from Brighton Beach, his blood-sworn enemy. The man who had kidnapped Nicholas 12 years ago. The one who had tortured him for 72 hours. Victor was the source of everything ruthless in Nicholas's life. And now Victor knew about Alara. Nicholas slammed the card onto his desk, his voice turning lethal. Double the security around Reverie Records. I want a 3-man team, rotating 24/7. Understood, boss. An hour later, Nicholas held a video call with Adrian. He held up the black rose. Victor sent this morning. Adrian's brow furrowed. He knows about her. He does. He's sending a message. What's the move, Nico? I'm taking her to the Montauk Villa. Adrian looked at his brother through the screen, his voice steady and reassuring. That's the right call. It's the safest place for her right now. Don't worry, Nico. I'll head down there this afternoon. We'll keep everything under control. Nicholas gave a slight nod. Thank you, brother. Adrian always knew what he was thinking, even before the words were spoken. In a crisis like this, Adrian's strategic mind was exactly what they needed. An hour later, Nicholas stood at the door of Reverie Records. Alara knew something was wrong the moment she saw him. For the first time since she'd met him, she saw true fear flickering in those silver-gray eyes. What happened? She asked. Nicholas didn't answer right away. He stepped inside, closed the door, and flipped the closed sign with a sharp, decisive flick, the gesture of a man who had made up his mind before he even arrived. Then he looked at her, his voice low and urgent. The enemies of my family. They know about us. I need you closer to me. I need you under my protection. Alara froze. The blood in her veins seemed to chill for a heartbeat. The enemies know about her. The words echoed in her head, growing heavier with every repetition. But as she looked at Nicholas, his jaw tight, his gaze fixed on her as if he were terrified she'd refuse, she realized that if she panicked now, she would only add to his burden. In moments like this, she had to stay sharp. What do I need to do? She asked. Come with me to my villa in Montauk. Alara fell silent. She looked down, then around her shop, the vinyl shelves, the vintage turntable, the coffee bar, the brown leather sofa where Nicholas had sat that very first night. For 2 years, she had built this place with her own 2 hands. This was her sanctuary, and now she had to leave, not knowing for how long, or if she'd ever truly come back. Finally, Alara nodded. Nicholas pulled her into his arms. It was a fierce, crushing hug, the kind given by someone who had just felt a massive weight lift from his chest. Alara could feel the heavy thud of his heart, faster than usual. Even though Nicholas couldn't feel physical pain, he clearly knew the agony of fear, the fear of losing her. She knew he felt guilty for dragging her into his world so soon, before their joy could even take root. Alara was scared too. Her body trembled slightly in his embrace, but she didn't let herself break. If Nicholas felt her shaking, she wanted him to know it wasn't doubt. It was just a reaction. Her mind was made up. She was choosing him. 2 hours later, a black SUV carried them away from Manhattan, heading east toward Montauk, the very tip of Long Island, where the land meets the Atlantic. Alara sat in the back, watching the city through the tinted glass. Manhattan slowly faded away. The skyscrapers shrank, the neon lights dimmed, replaced by rows of trees and a sky that seemed to open wider with every mile. She truly had no idea what her life would look like from here on out. Her mind was a chaotic tangle of fear, confusion, and anxiety. But strangely, amidst the turmoil, there was a quiet sense of relief. For the first time in 2 years, she didn't have to face everything alone. Nicholas sat beside her in silence. He didn't offer empty platitudes or hollow promises that everything would be fine. He just held her hand. His palm was cold. It was always cold. Nhưng cái cách anh siết tay cô rất nhẹ, vừa đủ, không buông ra, nói còn nhiều hơn cả lời nói. I'm here. I'm not letting you go. And Alara was grateful for it. Grateful for the silence. Grateful that he didn't let go. Grateful that while her head was spinning, she didn't need words. She just needed him there. The SUV came to a stop in front of the Montauk villa. Alara immediately understood why he called it a fortress. The 3-story white stone manor stood on a jagged cliff overlooking the sea. Waves crashed against the shore below, and a salty, biting wind swept up from the depths. This wasn't just a house. It felt like an entirely different world. Tomas opened the car door for them. Alara stepped into the main hall and stopped dead in her tracks. The ceilings were soaring. The floors were a polished, gleaming gray marble. A massive black granite fireplace sat at the heart of the house, its orange flames casting a warm, flickering glow. A winding walnut staircase with wrought iron railings spiraled toward the second floor. The living room was vast, furnished with charcoal leather sofas and antique Persian rugs, with floor-to-ceiling glass windows that looked straight out onto the ocean. The air smelled of cedar wood, vanilla candles, and the sharp tang of the sea. It was a space that was both opulent and strangely intimate. She had expected a MAFIA villa to be cold, filled with cameras and guns, a place built solely to project power. But this place had fire, candles, and the scent of wood. It felt like someone had tried very hard to turn a fortress into a home. Nicholas placed a hand on the small of her back, gentle and non-intrusive. This is where you are safest. Tie, 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 tie. He led her to the second floor. The hallway was lined with plush gray wool carpets, and antique brass wall lamps cast a soft amber light. Stopping at the end of the hall, he opened a door. This is your room. Alara stepped inside and forgot to breathe. A king-sized walnut bed sat covered in white linens and charcoal velvet blankets, its headboard piled with down pillows. Brass lamps on the nightstands bathed the room in a warm glow. Large windows draped in white voile looked out over the ocean. Outside, a small teak balcony held 2 wicker chairs side by side. The honey-colored oak floors were soft under a gray wool rug. The air carried a faint scent of lavender mixed with the sea breeze. But it was the bathroom that truly stunned her. It looked more like a private spa than a residential bathroom. The floors and walls were gray-veined white marble. A milky white stone-soaking tub was positioned right by the window, overlooking the waves. The shower area featured a rain shower head mounted to the ceiling and 4 additional massage jets. A double vanity of black stone with brushed gold faucets completed the room. Just 2 days ago, Alara's bathroom had been a tiny square above her shop with a temperamental water heater. Now, she was standing in a marble sanctuary, staring out at the Atlantic. Life was moving too fast. Nicholas stood in the doorway, watching her. "You've had a long day. Take a bath, try to relax. I'll come back later, I'll give you some space." Alara turned to look at him. "You're not staying?" "I need to meet with Adrian to finalize the security plans, but I'll be back before dinner. If you need anything, just press this." He pointed to a button on the wall. "Tomas will be here in seconds." Alara gave a small nod. "Thank you, Nico." Nicholas stepped toward her, leaned down, and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. His lips were warm. It was a quick, fleeting touch, over in a second. Then he stepped back. "Thank you for trusting me." Then he turned away. The door clicked shut behind him, and his footsteps faded down the hallway. Alara stood still, her hand instinctively touching her forehead where his lips had lingered. She realized that for the first time in 2 years, someone had touched her with such profound tenderness. Once he was gone, Alara stood alone in her marble bathroom looking at the sea. She sighed and turned on the faucet. Hot water cascaded from the rain shower head in large, steady droplets. As the water hit her shoulders and ran down her back, Alara closed her eyes. She tilted her head back, letting the heat wash away the sweat, the dust, the exhaustion, and for a brief moment, the suffocating anxiety. She knew this peace was only temporary. She knew that whatever was coming next was something she couldn't even imagine yet. But strangely, she was no longer asking herself if she had made the right choice. There was something fierce deep inside her, not just logic or survival instinct, but a quiet, growing faith that she could keep going, that she could walk this path with Nicholas, wherever it might lead. The water kept flowing. Steam fogged the mirrors, and Alara, for the first time in 2 years, stopped running. That evening at 7 o'clock, dinner was served in the first-floor dining room. The long walnut table, built to seat 10, was set for only 3 tonight. Nicholas sat at the head of the table. To his left was Adrian, his twin brother, sitting in a titanium wheelchair, dressed in a crisp white shirt. This was the first time Alara had met Adrian. Her immediate impression was how different he was from Nicholas. Though they shared the same rugged Eastern European features and those piercing silver-gray eyes, Adrian carried the warmth of someone who knew how to truly listen. His smile was effortless. His voice was polite and sincere, not the practiced etiquette of a power dynasty, but the genuine kindness of a man who cared. Adrian asked Alara about Johns Hopkins and her specialization in neurology. His eyes lit up as she explained the mechanisms of chronic pain. He was brilliant and refined, possessing an inner strength that was entirely different from Nicholas's, not the strength of a warrior, but of a man who had learned to live within his limits and turn them into an advantage. But what struck Alara most was the way the two brothers treated each other. It wasn't loud or performative. It was in the smallest gestures. Nicholas poured Adrian's wine before his own. Adrian reminded his brother to eat his vegetables instead of just focusing on the steak. Nicholas credited their recent victory to Adrian's strategic mind, while Adrian deflected the praise back, insisting that Nicholas was the one doing the heavy lifting. They complemented each other perfectly, one the blade, the other the mind. The bond between them required no explanation. It lived in the way they looked at each other, the rhythm of their conversation, and the comfortable silences that only those who truly understand one another can share. Sitting between the Kovac brothers that night, Alara finally understood why this mafia villa felt warmer than it looked. It was a home. The warmth, however, only lasted 3 days. On the third night at 2 a.m, the sound of gunfire tore Alara from her sleep. Victor had betrayed them. He had launched a reckless, full-scale ambush on the very villa thought to be their most secure fortress. It was a move of pure defiance. Tomas burst into her room and hurried her down to a reinforced concrete bunker, locking the heavy door from the outside. Nicholas was leading the defense on the first floor. Adrian was in the tactical room. And Alara was left alone in the dark, listening to the muffled roar of gunshots, the crash of breaking glass, and the screams echoing through the thick concrete walls. She could do nothing but pray. Nicholas stood behind a concrete pillar on the first floor, a Glock 19 inches his hand, his eyes glued to the security monitors. 30 men. Victor had brought 30 soldiers not to negotiate, not to warn, but to erase the Kovac family in a single night. Tomas confirmed through the earpiece that Alara was safe in the bunker. Adrian was in the tactical room, coordinating the defense from afar. Adrian's voice crackled in the earpiece, chillingly calm as he analyzed the battlefield. 3 points of entry. The front gate was the primary assault, while the west wing and the beach behind them formed a pincer movement. Adrian suggested pulling the men back to the center to create a defensive ring. Nicholas agreed instantly. He gave the order. 15 of his men retreated into the main hall, flipping tables for cover, weapons trained on every entrance. Then, the Bratva swarmed, the thunder of boots outside the gate. Shadows flooded in. Nicholas gave the command to open fire, and the main hall instantly became hell on earth. Glass shattered everywhere. The roar of gunfire drowned out all other sound. Bratva soldiers fell 1, 2, 3, but they were too many. They came in waves, one after another, relentless as the tide. Nicholas fired with lethal precision, every bullet finding a mark, but they kept advancing. The west wing was breached. Tomas's voice shouted a report through the comms. Nicholas immediately ordered the steel shutters closed and a retreat to the central corridor. The team fell back step by step, providing suppressing fire and holding formation while the Bratva flooded the hall like an overflowing river. A flashbang detonated. Blinding light tore through the darkness. Nicholas's ears rang with a deafening buzz. He rolled to the left, and a bullet tore into his shoulder. Hot blood spilled across his shirt. But his brain remained silent. No alarm bells, no screams of agony, nothing. Nicholas returned fire immediately, dropping 2 men charging toward him. Tomas shouted through the comms, "Boss is hit." "I'm fine," Nicholas snapped, and for him, it was the truth. He couldn't feel the pain. That was his power, and tonight, it was the only thing keeping him alive. 15 minutes passed. They held the central corridor at the cost of 5 wounded and 2 dead. But the Bratva wouldn't stop. Then Adrian's voice came through the earpiece, losing his composure for the first time. "Nico, they're trying to breach the bunker. They know Alara's in there." Everything in Nicholas's mind went dark. Strategy, defense, territory. It all vanished. There was only one thought left. Alara. He ordered Tomas down to the bunker to protect her. Then he kept firing. His ammo was running low. His hands began to tremble from blood loss, but his eyes never stopped scanning the corridor. And then, he saw him. A lone Bratva soldier had slipped through the side, an AK-47 inches his hands, charging toward the stairs leading to the bunker. He was going to kill Alara. Nicholas didn't think. He didn't calculate. He didn't assess the risk. He lunged after him, driven by the pure, raw instinct of a man protecting the woman he loved. At the bunker stairs, the man was raining bullets on the steel door. Nicholas roared at him to stop. The gunman spun around, leveling his rifle. Gunfire erupted. Nicholas rolled left, firing back, his bullets slamming into the man's shoulder. The gunman shrieked and began firing wildly. Bullets sprayed through the cramped space, ricocheting off the walls, whistling past Nicholas's ears. And then, a bullet found him. Not his chest, not his abdomen. His head, a grazing shot that sliced through the outer layer of his temporal lobe. Blood sprayed, blurring his vision. The world tilted. But his hand still held his gun. He could still lift it. One last bullet. Straight through the man's heart. The gunman collapsed, and Nicholas fell with him. His head hit the wall. Blood soaked his face. His ears rang with a hollow silence. His vision faded. He lay on the cold concrete floor, staring up at the ceiling. The hallway lights were flickering, growing more distant, dimmer. From far away, he heard Tomas's voice screaming, "Boss!" Then the steel door swung open. The sound of frantic footsteps, and Alara's voice shaking, panicked, yet still holding the steady rhythm of a doctor. "Nicholas, wake up! Can you hear me?" Nicholas felt her hand grip his. It was warm. Her palm was just as warm as that first night at Reverie Records. He wanted to tell her she was safe. He wanted to tell her he had saved her. He wanted to say so many things that 12 years of numbness had never taught him how to utter. But his lips wouldn't move. And then the darkness swallowed him whole. 3 days. For 3 days, Nicholas lay motionless in the high-tech recovery suite of the Kovac Medical Center in Manhattan. The hospital bed was cold and stark. The steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sign of life. The white bandages wrapped around his head were stained with a dark, dried crimson. Throughout those 72 hours, Nicholas never once opened his eyes. Alara sat by his side, clutching his hand, a hand that remained chillingly unresponsive. She watched his chest rise and fall with the mechanical breath of the ventilator. He was alive, but he wasn't there. On the morning of the third day, Dr. Morrison arrived with the latest CT scans. He studied them intensely before speaking. The wound isn't deep. The bullet only grazed the outer layer of the temporal lobe. It didn't penetrate the skull. The hematoma has cleared, and the swelling is down. By all accounts, he should have woken up 48 hours ago. Then why hasn't he? Alara asked, her voice trembling. Morrison suspected it was tied to the neurological procedure Nicholas had undergone when he was 20. The family records mentioned a neurointervention back in 2009, the moment Nicholas lost his ability to feel physical pain. Morrison believed this new trauma had struck the exact area of the previous modification, triggering an abnormal reaction. To be sure, they needed the original surgeon. What was his name? Ilara whispered. Dr. Konstantin Volkov, Morrison replied. A Serbian neurosurgeon. He lost his license back in 2010. The world seemed to stop spinning. Konstantin Volkov. Her father. Alara stumbled back, gripping the edge of the bed to stay upright. When Morrison asked if she knew him, she could only manage a hollow, strangled yes. The world, it seemed, was cruelly small. 12 years after that surgery, here she was, sitting by the bed of the very patient her father had changed forever. But she didn't have the luxury of shock. Nicholas was teetering on the edge. She forced herself to think. Ilara called her father. His voice was deep and familiar, asking if she was okay, a simple question from a father to a daughter. But she had no time for pleasantries. Papa, I need your help. Nicholas Kovac, the patient you treated in 2009. He's in a coma. There was a heavy silence on the other end. Finally, Konstantin spoke. He told her to go back to Reverie Records and find his 2009 journal in the basement archives. Read it first, he said, then call me back. She raced to the shop. In the corner where she kept her father's old medical files, she tore through the journals until she found it. 2009. Subject D, K, 20 years old. Identical twin of AK. Konstantin had used Formula 47, a morphine derivative, combined with an NMDA receptor antagonist to permanently sever the pain pathways. The first side effect was expected, phantom pain. But the second side effect made Alara's skin crawl. The pain signals didn't just vanish. They were diverted. They were funneled into a host with near-identical DNA, an identical twin. The signals weren't erased. They were merely rerouted. And the distribution was uneven. Adrian was paralyzed. His nervous system was already compromised. He didn't have the biological pushback of a healthy man. The result, for every 10 pains that struck, Nicholas felt 2. Adrian carried 8. The weaker brother had been forced to carry the lion's share of the agony. Adrian, Alara recalled the dinner in Montauk. For 12 years, Adrian had been a lightning rod for Nicholas's pain, and no one knew. She called her father back, her voice shaking with rage and sorrow. Konstantin explained that Nicholas's brain was now trapped between 2 systems, the natural pain signals trying to reboot after the trauma, and Formula 47 trying to keep them off. The conflicting signals caused the brain to simply shut down. The only solution was a reversal surgery. Not just 1, but 2. Simultaneous procedures for both Nicholas and Adrian. They needed to harvest a cluster of healthy neurons from Adrian's temporal lobe, the area untouched by the drug, and graft them into Nicholas. Because their DNA was identical, his body would accept the graft. If it worked, Nicholas would wake up and feel pain normally, and the bridge would be burned. Adrian would finally be free. Did you tell them, Papa? Ilara choked out. When you did this, did you tell them Adrian would suffer for him? Silence. Then a sigh. Constantine hadn't told them. To him, the Kovac family needed Nicholas alive at any cost. Adrian was already paralyzed. In Constantine's cold logic, his suffering was a favorable variable for the greater good. Understanding doesn't make it right, Papa, Ilara whispered. There are choices, Ilara, that the world will never understand unless they stand where I stood. Finally, she said, I'm asking you for this one thing. Come here. Save him. Constantine exhaled, a sound of profound relief. I'll be there tomorrow afternoon, my daughter. It has been a long time since I've seen New York. For the first time in her life, Ilara wanted to meet her father at the airport. Not out of duty, but because she needed to see the man who had caused her so much resentment. When he stepped through the international arrivals gate, she recognized him instantly. He was gray now, his face lined with the weight of 1,000 surgeries, but his eyes were still sharp behind his silver-rimmed glasses. Ilara. He didn't hug her. He just placed a hand on her shoulder and squeezed a gesture that said more than he ever could with words. They went to a quiet corner cafe. Constantine ordered Earl Grey. Ilara, a black Americano. Do you want to tell me how you met him? He asked, a trace of curiosity in his voice. Ilara smiled a genuine, unexpected smile. She told him how Nicholas had stumbled into her shop, bleeding and broken, and how her own buried instincts had come roaring back to life. Constantine smirked. So, was it your medical talent or something else that drew you to him? Papa! She laughed, the sound light and free for the first time in years. Then she looked at her coffee and grew serious. Papa, I'm sorry. Constantine waited. I blamed you for years. For leaving, for the work you did, for not being there when Mama died. But now, after seeing Nicholas's world, I understand. There are stories that don't fit into a moral box. There are choices made out of a desperation the world will never know. I'm old enough to see that now. I owe you an apology. Constantine reached into his coat and placed an envelope on the table. It was enough money to pay off her entire bank loan. I have worked my whole life, he said. If it's not to serve the people I love, then none of it matters. Ilara burst into tears, not the quiet kind, but a heavy, soul-cleansing sob. She cried for Nicholas, for her father, and for herself. Constantine sat beside her, rubbing her back just as he had when she was a child. He reminded her that being vulnerable wasn't a defeat. It was simply being human. My daughter has grown up, he whispered. Tomorrow, they would walk into the operating room together, not as father and daughter, but as colleagues. The following afternoon, Constantine arrived at the Kovac Medical Center. He was no longer Ilara's father. He was Dr. Volkov. He demanded the latest scans, his mind already in surgical mode. The surgical suite was divided into 2 rooms, separated by a soundproof glass partition. Room A was for Nicholas Constantine's domain. Room B was for Adrian, the responsibility of Ilara and Dr. Morrison. Listen closely, Constantine said before they scrubbed in. Nico's brain is stuck. We need to bridge the gap. We harvest the neurons from Adrian, transfer them to Nico, and restore his original pain map. We cut the bridge between them forever. 7 in the morning. The surgeries began. In room B, Adrian was calm. Before the anesthesia took hold, he looked at Ilara. This is the first time I've been on this table and felt relieved. Sleep well, Adrian, she whispered. Morrison opened the path to the temporal lobe with surgical precision. Ilara monitored the vitals and the EEG, preparing the graft. When Morrison extracted the cluster, no larger than a pea but containing millions of neurons, Ilara placed it in a specialized medium and passed it through the transfer port to room A. On the other side, Constantine was ready. He took the graft and began the delicate process of implantation. For the next 2 hours, Ilara finished the closing on Adrian, but her eyes never left the monitors in the next room. She watched her father's hands that were 63 years old but still as steady as a mountain as he worked to save the man she loved. At 10:47 a.m., Constantine looked through the glass at Ilara. Closing, he signaled. Ilara exhaled a breath she felt she had been holding for years. Outside, Tomas was leaning against the wall, his face like stone. When Ilara walked out and removed her mask, she only had to look at him. It's a success. Both of them, she said. Tomas closed his eyes and let out a jagged breath. Konstantin walked out right behind her, stripping off his gloves. He placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Well done, colleague. Alara smiled through her exhaustion. Now, all they had to do was wait. Wait for Nicholas to open his eyes. Wait for Adrian to wake up and feel nothing but his own body. Wait for two brothers to finally live in the skins they were meant to inhabit. Adrian was the first to come around. 2 hours after the surgery, he opened his eyes. Dr. Morrison performed the standard checks: pupils, reflexes, cognitive function. Everything was perfect. His vitals were steady, and his brain waves showed no signs of the linguistic or memory glitches they had feared. Adrian looked around the room, his gaze settling on Alara, then down at his hands resting on the white sheets. He stayed silent for a few seconds, as if he were carefully listening to the inner workings of his own body. Then, he spoke. His voice was husky from the anesthesia, a mere whisper. Alara, I don't feel it. The pain, it's gone. Just those few words. But for the first time, Alara saw his eyes truly clear. The permanent shadow of agony that usually clouded his gaze had finally lifted. She told him to rest, that it was finally over. Adrian nodded, closed his eyes, and drifted into a normal sleep, not a sleep of exhaustion, but one of genuine peace. An hour later, the Kovac parents arrived. His mother rushed to Adrian's side, clutching his hand in a silence that spoke volumes. His father stood behind her, a hand on her shoulder, the stoic mask of a powerful man barely concealing his turmoil. When Morrison reported that the recovery was on track, Mrs. Kovac stood and took Konstantin's hands in hers. Thank you, Dr. Volkov. Thank you for coming back for us. Mr. Kovac shook Konstantin's hand, a firm, heavy grip. Then, he turned to Alara. Miss Cross, the Kovac family acknowledges what you have done. To a man like him, that acknowledgement was the highest honor he could bestow. When Adrian woke again, his mother stroked his hair. How do you feel, my son? Adrian replied softly. I'm okay, Mama. I feel light. I haven't felt this light in years. Mrs. Kovac turned away, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Mr. Kovac tightened his grip on her hand, his jaw set. For 12 years they had lived in the dark, never knowing one son was secretly bleeding the agony of the other. Now, the truth arrived with the dawn of a new life, a bittersweet relief that took their breath away. 6 months. 6 months since Nicholas first opened his eyes in the Montauk villa and for the first time in over a decade felt what it meant to be human. It wasn't a miracle of instant healing. It was a baptism of fire. The surgical incision burned like a brand. His muscles ached down to the marrow. His head felt heavy as lead. Every tiny movement triggered a jolt of sensation he didn't know how to process. For 12 years, Nicholas had taken bullets without flinching, crushed bones without blinking, and ignored stabs and fractures. Now, a simple bump of his arm against the bed frame was enough to make him recoil. The first month was hell, perhaps even more brutal than the 72 hours of torture he endured at 20. Back then, he felt nothing. Now, he felt everything. Every old injury in his body seemed to wake up at once, demanding to be acknowledged. Some nights he lay curled in a ball, drenched in sweat, teeth gritted not from the new surgery, but from an old shoulder wound that suddenly throbbed as if it had happened yesterday. But Alara was always there. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She sat by him, checked his fever, adjusted his meds, and calmly explained the biology of it all. That pain in your shoulder is an old inflammation. It's not dangerous. 15 minutes with a heat pack, and it will subside. Alara taught Nicholas how to read his own body. She taught him to distinguish which pain was a warning and which was just a ghost passing through. She was like a teacher guiding a child through the basics of hot and cold. Patient, steady, unwavering. His family was there too. His mother brought soup every evening, watching over him until he finished every drop. His father, a man of few words, left a book on his nightstand that he himself had read during a long recovery years ago, his own silent way of saying, I understand. And Adrian, appearing on a video screen from his physical therapy sessions, would grin at his brother. Welcome back to the world, Nico. Hurts, doesn't it? But every time he saw that smile, a different kind of pain would flare in Nicholas's chest, a pain no medication could touch. Remorse. For 12 years, he had lived like an arrogant god, walking through a hail of lead, never knowing he was borrowing his peace from his brother's very bones. Every time he took a hit in Brooklyn without flinching, Adrian's nervous system was being torn apart in a quiet room somewhere else. He had built the Kovac empire on the blood of his enemies, but he had sustained it on the suffering of his twin. That truth weighed heavier than any bullet. Nicholas watched Adrian's legs on the screen. They were beginning to show tiny, flickering reflexes under the guidance of specialists. For the first time in 12 years, Adrian's eyes weren't glazed over by the fog of chronic pain. Seeing his brother drenched in sweat but radiant with joy over a simple leg twitch made Nicholas feel a relief so sharp it was almost painful. Let the pain come, he thought. Every sting, every ache he felt now was a long overdue apology to his brother. He was glad Adrian was free, glad his brother could finally sleep without nightmares. To Nicholas, the price he was paying now was a bargain for that one genuine smile. Physically, Nicholas had to accept he was no longer the immortal. His muscles were still there, but his endurance had hit a ceiling. Sparring sessions with Tomas that used to last 2 hours now ended in 40 minutes, but his recovery was phenomenal. Morrison called it a genetic advantage, nothing to do with the drug. The irony was, the ability to feel pain actually made him a smarter fighter. Before, Nicholas charged in like a beast, reckless, fearless, uncalculating. Now, every strike had weight. Every move was deliberate, because he knew exactly what the cost would be if he slipped. It didn't make him weak, it made him lethal. Alara called it true survival instinct, something he'd lacked for 12 years because his body had never forced him to have it. As for the family business, the underworld doesn't wait for anyone to heal. But paradoxically, the attack on the Montauk Villa became the Kovacs' greatest power play. The Bratva had launched a frontal assault on their home and were decimated. More than half their men were gone, their commander was in Tomas's custody, and the message echoing through New York was clear: attacking the Kovacs is suicide. And Nicholas, the man who was shot in the head, fell into a coma and stood back up 6 months later? In the MAFIA world, that isn't weakness, that's legend. Tomas utilized the power vacuum to expand their reach along the East Coast. Adrian redesigned their entire logistics network leaner, tighter, more efficient. And Nicholas spent his time on diplomacy, solidifying alliances, renegotiating contracts, and reordering the hierarchy. His style had shifted. He was less about showy violence and more about calculated precision. He was calmer, and strangely, that made people fear him more. A shouting boss is dangerous, but a boss who calmly sips tea and says, "I think we should revisit our agreement," is terrifying. The Kovac dynasty wasn't just standing, it was unshakable. Not just because of fear, but because of respect. Tonight, Nicholas sat on the balcony of the Montauk Villa, looking out at the sea. The cold wind whipped past him, and he felt it. The chill was a luxury. He held a cup of hot tea, the warmth seeping into his palms bit by bit. He smiled at the sheer simplicity of it. This was the version of himself he felt most hopeful about. He was weaker than before, that much was true. But for the first time in his life, he was alive. Truly alive, with every sensation intact. The pain of a wound, the warmth of a touch, the bite of the wind, and the ache in his chest whenever Alara laughed. It was a kind of ache that didn't need morphine. It didn't need a cure. It just needed to be held. The balcony door opened. Alara stepped out, draped a sweater over his shoulders, and sat beside him without a word. They watched the ocean for a long time. "Nico," she said. "I've decided. I'm closing Reverie Records." Nicholas turned to her. That shop was her everything. The place she built from nothing. The place she hid from her past. The place where he first stumbled into her life. Alara kept her eyes on the horizon, her voice steady. "I'm going back to medicine. I want to chase the dream of healing that I left behind. That surgery, standing next to my father, saving you, saving Adrian. I realize that's what I'm meant to do. I'm done running." Nicholas watched her for a long time. The sea breeze tossed her hair, and her emerald eyes reflected the moonlight. On her face was something he hadn't seen since that first night: true peace. Not the peace of someone hiding, but the peace of someone who has finally found their way home. "I'm happy for you, Ilara," he said, his voice dropping low. "This feels like a gift for everything we've been through. Seeing you become your true self, it makes everything worth it." Ilara didn't say anything else. She simply reached out and laced her fingers with his. Two hands his, which now knew the cold, hers, still as warm as that first night, interlocking on the railing. The night sea crashed against the cliffs below, rhythmic, patient, like the breathing of someone in a deep, peaceful sleep. And for the first time, Nicholas wasn't counting breaths to wait for the pain to pass. He was counting breaths because he wanted to remember this moment, every single second of it. Nicholas was once the man who couldn't feel pain. It sounded like a superpower. But to live without pain is to live without truly being alive. He had moved through the world like a ghost, formidable, untouchable, but hollow. He took bullets without flinching and lost years he should have felt deeply, all because he believed that being painless was being strong. He was wrong. Strength isn't the absence of pain. Strength is feeling the pain and standing up anyway. It's feeling every wound on your body and choosing to keep walking. It's knowing fear, knowing the sting, knowing the ache, and still reaching for the hand beside you to walk through the dark. A woman had taught Nicholas that, not with grand speeches, but by brewing a cup of coffee for a bleeding stranger, by standing in an operating room to save his life, and then calmly asking the next morning, "Where does it hurt?" She gave him what no amount of power or money could buy, the feeling of being alive, truly alive. His name is Nicholas Kovac. He was once the man who couldn't feel pain, but now he is the happiest man in the world, because finally he knows what it is to hurt. And only when you know the pain can you truly know the love.